popcorn, grab your drink of choice, grab your Black Phillip if you got one. It is time for the Witches Movie Coven. Yep, witches talking about witches in movie. But before we go anywhere, let me introduce the Coven to you. I am Patti Negri, and this is Richard-Lael Lillard. This is Jason Mankey, and this is Heather Greene, and this is Courtney Buck. What? This isn't Courtney Buckley at all. This filling in for Courtney Buckley is Chad Hatter. Hi, Chad Hatter. Welcome to the Witches Movie Coven.
Hello. Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be on.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. I think you came via Richard-Lael, and we wish our beautiful Courtney well. She did so much on her anti-Valentine's tour. She's laying dead somewhere. I don't know, but she's watching. And hello, Courtney, somewhere. I am Patti Negri. I am one of your hosts. And this week we are talking about classic Disney witches. So I'm going to, as I usually do, turn this over to Heather, who is the expert on all such things. Heather.
Well, this week it gets even worse because I also spent most of my master's degree and master's career in film school studying Disney animation. So I could probably spend the next 3 hours of your time talking about Disney animation. But in the interest of the Coven and you as well, I will not do that. But briefly, just a little history, which is what I like to give you guys some context, is that Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, 1937, was their first full-length animated film after being successful doing short animation. And this was a film that was very close to Walt Disney's heart, and it was highly successful. And people loved it. It won a Special Academy Award. It was the special full Oscar with 7 little Oscars given to him by Shirley Temple. So they didn't have Oscars for animation at that time. So this was a special award. And what's interesting is, talking about another film that we did recently, is that this film is what then propelled The Wizard of Oz, because people wanted to do something to match the success of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Now, after that, Disney got wrapped up into the 1940s. We had the war, and he didn't repeat the formula until 1951 with Cinderella, another successful princess film. Didn't have a witch in it, though. So then he began Sleeping Beauty, which is the other film in our tonight. So that started in 1951, and it really dredged on for a long time. It wasn't released until 1959, and it was a big failure. He called it an expensive flop, and Disney was very upset. So he did not repeat the formula again until a lot of history, a lot of stuff went on, and I could talk about that for eons. It's fabulously interesting. But he did not repeat the formula until our third film, 1989, with Little Mermaid, which brought Disney back to the forefront of feature animation after a long haul, and was highly successful and won an Academy Award for the best score, which I'm sure Richard-Lael will share several numbers with us tonight. So that's the brief history of the 3 films that we're going to talk about tonight. Not the witches, though. I think we're going to talk about them particularly.
Yes, we are. And I'm, you're going to kick me out of the Coven, but as a rule, I'm not a big animation person. I'm not. I don't know why. But in rewatching these, I forgot how much I did love them, and how much, oh my God, I did grow up with these. And I was so pleasantly surprised at how much I really remembered that I did like animation, and how good it was, and the music, how good it was. It was amazing. But who wants to start? Who wants to? Yeah, Richard-Lael, you look like you want to start.
I will start. Before I say anything about how I really feel, I'm going to start by saying some really good things about Disney. I'm going to say that Disney makes a lot of people very happy, and then they become bridezillas because they can't be princesses. But it makes them very happy, and that's wonderful, and that's good, and that's great. And Disney employs a lot of artists, and they're all very culturally, every Disney film is culturally significant. Even in the dark period, was it the goodness, I can't remember. It was when they were doing the dark ones in the Disney, right before the reformula of Little Mermaid. I can't remember even
The
The
Black
Black
Cauldron.
Cauldron,
Black
Great
Cauldron.
Mouse Detective. Yeah.
So when they sort of did their renaissance, yes, it's culturally significant. And I will say this, in things like Coco, which I watched on a cruise, it's beautiful and it's multicultural and it's beautiful and wonderful. However, I will say, now that I've said all of the nice things, I'm going to say that what I don't like about Disney is that it stems, I get it. When Walt Disney himself was an animator, he had created a character back in the 20s and he thought he owned it. And then it turns out that he didn't own it. So he decided that he was going to own everything that he did. So he takes these classic stories and then he owns it forever so that people only know his version and the old versions don't exist. That drives me crazy. I also like the fact in the original fairy tales is that they're not always a happy ending. It doesn't get all tied up in a nice, neat little bow. And I like the fact that sometimes a Little Mermaid has to make a tough decision to have a soul, which Hans Christian Andersen wanted. Mermaids don't have souls, so according to legend, and she wanted to be a human, and the only way to be a human was that if she were to sacrifice. And so she walks on knives. That's basically the pain that she feels, and then she has to commit a sacrifice. And it doesn't mean that she ever gets to talk again, but she gets the sacrifice, and then she realizes she can't kill this man that she loved, even though he betrayed her, and so she flings herself into the sea and becomes sea foam. It was really one about self-sacrifice, and it was not about happy endings. So is it culturally significant? Yes. Is the art beautiful? Well, it's art. And
Wow.
it does make a lot of people very happy, and a lot of people love the music, and a lot of people live by it. And I think I applaud them if they can, but I personally am not a fan of Disney.
Okay. So do you want to comment on any one film? Do we want to start from the beginning, 1937 or 9 or whatever that, or
Do you want me
yeah.
to?
yeah.
I mean, yeah. I mean, like I
Just
said,
in-
it's culturally significant.
Okay.
I did actually kind of enjoy. I enjoyed the evil queen in Snow White. I will admit that. I do love, even though there's a lot of queer coding, but I really do love Disney villains, I have to admit. So, 1937, the evil queen. And there was a funny story actually that I was doing research. The animator looked across the table at this woman that was there, and she said, "Why are you staring at me? Why are you staring at me?" It turns out that with her high cheekbones and her fine features, he wanted her to be the evil queen. And she said, "Well, at least I'm not the old hag."
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. All right. Okay, Jason.
I thought that was much nicer than I'd anticipated from Richard-Lael, so I'm gonna run with that. I expected a complete skewering of Disney to start the show, so I appreciate your restraint. I like Disney. I've always been a big fan of Disney, and I'm a big fan of traditional animation. The CGI is pretty, and I get why people like it. It saddens me that they do not make traditional animation anymore. And rewatching Sleeping Beauty and Snow White, I was amazed at just how beautiful everything was. The colors are so vivid, and the way that a cloak trails down a staircase is not something that they've been able to do with CGI yet. There's just something really magical about it. I can't say that I'm a fan of all three of these films, but I'm a big fan of the way all three of these films look. And there's something about Snow White. I can't imagine what it was like seeing that in 1937, because it would have just been awe-inspiring and mind-blowing, because nothing like that had ever existed before. To see a fairy tale on a big screen with all that color, with all that sound, with all those voices, must have just been a transformative experience for people back then.
Thank you. Chad.
Well, okay, so Richard-Lael and I, once upon a time in pre-COVID, before times, we would meet up on the weekends, and we would meet up sporadically throughout the week, usually at 11 p.m. ish. And we would get together and we would have tea in his dark, gothic, musty Victorian abode where he had blacked out the windows and everything was swathed in fringe and murky light. And so it felt as if one was in the presence of a Disney villain. And I have to piggyback on what he said, because he and I share the same annoyances where we can recognize the merit of these films, but the one thing that bothers us the most is that the degree that they affect popular culture is somewhat irritating, because if one tries to have a conversation with somebody about the way the original fairy tales were written, you usually end up with one or two things. You usually end up with someone regurgitating sensationalized retelling from a TikTok video where it's designed to ruin your childhood, where they get it completely wrong, or you get the Disney version. So when you try to have a conversation about the different offshoots of fairy tales and the different retellings and the different versions, I constantly run into the brick wall of, well, that's not what happened in the movie. Well, that's not the movie. Well, that's not the movie. As if the movie is the end all be all of the story. So watching Snow White, watching The Little Mermaid, watching Sleeping Beauty, there's so much going on in it that's good, that it's kind of remarkable, because you watch Snow White and you see this brilliant artistry that then improves with Sleeping Beauty, and the way that the plants are drawn and the color scheme and the way that the costumes are medieval costumes, but through a mid-mod filter. And that's how you get Aurora's peasant outfit that has the little collar, which is not, little things like that. And then you get to Little Mermaid, where all of that kind of goes away, and it's much more of a straightforward, candy-coated entity. And I'm here as a last-minute replacement, and I just want to talk about some evil witches and maybe ones that aren't quite so evil, because it's all about perception ultimately. So I hope that, so that's basically my opinion, is that I recognize also, I'm just going to quote this great philosopher, Richard-Lael, once said that he sees the cultural significance, but he's not quite a fan of Disney. So I'm a fan of the artistry. I'm not a fan of the stigma that comes with the Disney name, if that makes any. I took a class in college that was called Breaking the Disney Spell, and it just, it completely rewired my brain. So
without Disney, though, given the nature of these stories in their original form, would anyone really be reading them today in sort of a mass, way? I don't think so, because I think that our tastes in entertainment have changed so much from 200 years ago that these
Speak
more
for yourself,
sanitized.
Jason Mankey.
You and I'm sure, would have read them. Many others would not have. They would have been too busy reading Little House on the Prairie and other things which are a little nicer and don't have all the barbs and sharp edges the original Grimm's fairy tales had.
I mean, I would argue that no one's reading them because they're watching the movies. So,
and I want to jump in here and just say, we get to the witches in particular in terms of witchcraft. Is that Disney was not the only one remaking these films. So the question is, would they be reading them? They might not be reading them, but they're going to watch all the other adaptations. Hansel and Gretel has been and Disney hasn't done Hansel and Gretel in a full-length animated feature. They did a short, but it's done and redone by a lot of other people other than Disney. And that brings me back to Richard-Lael's original one point that he made, which is key. And it's not just for the witch, but it's for everybody, is that all the characters, that when Disney is so powerful, when they do retell a story, it becomes the story. So when someone says in pop culture, no, walking down the street, you ask somebody, and I used to talk about this with my original work that was studying animation. If you ask anybody on the street, tell me what a Cinderella looked like, they're going to say, oh, she wears a light blue dress and she has a golden crown. Why? Because of Disney. And that's something that Disney does because they're powerful, but it's also something that American Hollywood movies do in general. And once a book or a text is put into a visual format that becomes popularized to the degree that Disney was, it becomes that it overtakes our mental storytelling. So a lot of cases, like people will read a book and then they'll watch the movie, and then the visuals from that movie overtake what they were thinking when they actually read the book. So that's what's happening here. And so is that and Disney doesn't retell the stories faithfully, which brings us back to the witch. In the fairy tales, the witches are not as prominent. In Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, there's only one mention of witchcraft. There's no mention of a witch. There's only one mention of witchcraft. In the Little Mermaid, the witch is a character that's supposed to push the morality of it and the ethics. She's not the monolithic evil that we see, and that's the same with Sleeping Beauty. It's the same thing. The Sleeping Beauty character that we call Maleficent, that was not Maleficent, was just the bad fairy in the original story. She comes in, casts a spell because she's angry she wasn't invited, and then she's gone for the rest of the tale. So Disney created a very binary extreme evil with all three of these that now we associate with these tales that did not exist in the original tales because they were different. So it's really, really cool. And what's even more interesting is that I always argue that the Wicked Witch of the West is the most influential witch character in American pop culture. And that's true. However, I could also argue that the Wicked Queen is, because the Wicked Queen is what prompted them to make the Wicked Witch of the West and set up that binary, because Disney did it first. Disney not only did it first, but they also did the first vamp witch, which blew my mind when I was doing research. And what does that mean? It means Disney was the first visual storyteller in Hollywood to link a woman's beauty, her age, her sexuality, and her sense of self with witchcraft. She's the first vamp. And because of the code, they couldn't do it. Disney did it anyway, and they didn't care because it was an animated film. But there are very few. Disney did it first, and I'm like, that's pretty cool.
Have you seen the fairy tale theater adaptation of The Little Mermaid?
When was that done?
1980s.
Yeah, with Shelley Long.
Shelley Duvall.
Shelley Duvall. Thank you, just Shelley. Yes, I did a long time ago. Yes.
I love the Sea Witch in that version because when the Little Mermaid, who I believe in that version is called Pearl, comes in and, I have fallen in love with this mortal, but in order to be with him, I need legs. Can you give me legs? The first words out of the Sea Witch's mouth are, don't do it. No man is worth that. You don't need to change yourself to find happiness. You don't need it. Do not do it. She urges the mermaid not to do it. And it's only when the mermaid says, well, I have made up my mind and I want to do this, that she finally relents. But she also, like you said, to coin the phrase monolithic evil is brilliant, because in order to have that villain, you have to take it to an extreme. And Tchaikovsky did the same thing when he did the adaptation of the Sleeping Beauty ballet, because the fairy does come back. Mm-hmm. And it's remarkable how many times I've had arguments with people because they will hear the music in the ballet and they'll be like, oh, they ripped off Disney. And it's like, no, Disney used that music for their movie. And you get that same problem where people go back to the only pop culture variant that they're aware of, and that for them becomes the staple. And so it is really interesting. It is incredibly interesting, the idea of a monolithic evil, because the way that fairy tale, Bruno Bettelheim has many, many, many articles focusing on the female archetype and what is good and what is evil. And one of the comments, and I lost who it was, but one of the comments made a comment about why is there always a dead parent? Well, there has to be a dead parent, because that's the only way that a child reading the story can substitute in a villain in a parental figure, knowing that they are ultimately disconnected and thereby able to relate. Mm-hmm. It's a whole archetype that has to do with the very notion of what is good versus what is evil. And filmmaking especially requires a monolithic evil, because otherwise the story runs a very gentle, natural course. It does not peak. So in order to have that peak, you have to have the hero triumph, et cetera, et cetera. And I do have to say that the defeat of Maleficent makes me tear up every single time, because Philip riding into battle with an enchanted sword.
Chad.
I'm sorry. Sorry, I
I
swooned. I'm so embarrassed.
Oh no, that's fabulous. Welcome, Chad. When I watched it when I was a little kid, I didn't think of any of that or didn't know who Disney was or anything like that. I just got lost in the story, and I think it was a perfect story for a kid. When I watched it at my nowhere near a child age, I again not expecting a lot. I just got lost in the story. Good, bad, right, wrong. And to me, that's a good movie. I like the bad witches. I like the good. I don't know.
I would argue there's not much of a story with Snow White. While I was watching it, I will admit that I was bored. And I did not expect to be as bored as I was. My wife was also bored. There's barely any story. It's like, are you going to be done cleaning this hut with these animals? Like, is it really sanitary to be washing the dishes with a squirrel's tail? I don't think so myself. You know,
Times were different back then.
Certainly every scene with the evil queen is the best scenes of the whole film. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? There's a reason that is so iconic. It takes forever to get to the dwarves. I remember when we were watching it Monday night, I was like, when do we get to the dwarves? When are we going to get to the dwarves? I'm so bored. I need to see the dwarves. And then I saw them and I was a little disappointed with them. They didn't hold up for me as an adult as much as I thought they might. They were just so cranky. You know, they just
dopey and sneaky and fluffy and
bashful, grumpy. Yeah.
What's interesting about not Sleeping Beauty, what's interesting about Snow White is the fairy tale is meant to show the importance of being a good wife. Because she's ultimately protected by the dwarves because of her homemaking skills. She's able to cook, she's able to clean, she's able to make beds and mend clothing and do all these things. And that's ultimately the exchange that she makes with them in the original fairy tale is they say, if you mind the house so we can focus on work, we don't mind hiding you out here. And so that's partially why it takes the evil queen so long to find her. Because she lives, with the 7 dwarves over the 7 mountains, beyond the 7 forests, and blah 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 blah. And it's interesting in the original fairy tale, the queen does not come to her once with the apple. She comes to her 3 different times, and each time with a different instrument. And each time, the first time is with, I believe it's the corset designed to break her ribs and suffocate her, and then the second time it's with a poisoned comb, both of which are appealing to her vanity as a woman. So it's ironic that she is obsessed with being the fairest of them all, and yet these instruments of death that she has created mirror her own vanity and even the things that she does to herself to try to maintain what I would refer to as capitalistic beauty. It's fabulous. It's just, she's so evil. Are we allowed to curse?
No. This is a family show.
It's YouTube. It's a family show. It's
then I will just say she's just such a witch.
The interesting thing about her, and I want to relate them through and talk about the 3 witches, which I think is really one of the fascinating threads that weaves through Disney's 3 witches. Is it Disney, and I think someone pointed it out in so many words, that Disney has a canned formula. This is what I call the princess formula. And so it takes the fairy tales and stuffs them into the formula. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. They haven't done it more recently. They've been breaking their formula, but that's what they did with these 3 films. And so when we look at the witches, the first witch, of course, is the Wicked Queen. She was designed to be after the vamp Hollywood actresses, Marlene Dietrich. She was supposed to be the most beautiful. She was described as a beautiful woman in the fairy tale. And then Disney animators, all of whom were men, had to then come up with a figure who would be the most beautiful. And so this was out of their own minds, the most beautiful woman who is evil. So they modeled her on Marlene Dietrich and other vamp actresses at the time in the 30s. Okay. So they did that. And then the colors that you see her in, she's very pale. She's surrounded by purples and blacks. That's her dominant color, touch of red, okay? And so that's the majority of what you get with her. She's gorgeous, and she still is gorgeous. And she was supposed to be. That's what they talked about when they were designing her. So she also is bat-like. If you notice, her costuming has a bat-like crown around her, right?
Yeah.
So you then go to when they try to stuff the formula again and they're redoing this character, she is now Maleficent. Now Maleficent has bluish green skin. Where does that come from? If you've heard me talk, you know that's the influence of the Wizard of Oz. Of course, a witch or evil witch character has green skin at this point, so they use that there, but she is again surrounded by dark black with this almost inhuman skin color, not pale in this case, it's green or blue. And she's got the black and the purple with often a touch of red. So you have the same visual cues happening here once again. Now, she, of course, is not human. So whereas the evil queen dies by running off of a cliff, nobody kills her. This is an inhuman character. So you can have her be impaled by the male hero. I'm sorry, Chad. I don't mean to bring it up. Are you okay?
I will be fine.
Okay, just close your ears for a second. So then she is at this point a monster. She's visually become even less human. She's now a dragon. So she's gone. Now Disney gets, as I said, if I can sit and chat with you about what happened between 1959 and 1989, a lot happened with Disney, a lot of bad stuff. We had a few other witches. But then you get to 1989 and they try their formula again. They stuff the Little Mermaid, and it's the least like the original Little Mermaid. They stuff it in again, and this time they create a very inhuman character, octopus. And this time the octopus is modeled after Divine. Okay. Ursula is fantastic, first of all. And someone asked who is the most powerful. If we were put them in a room, they have a fight, who would win? I would bet on Ursula, first of all. So I'm just going to say that someone asked that. So
I agree totally.
If you look at her coloring again, you're looking at blacks and purples, the same cues. Okay. Now she's an octopus. Why is she black and purple? So, I've mostly usually look brown and red to me when I've seen them in the wild. But she is black and purple. Again, same coloring, same touches of red, same character. Okay. Now it's 1989. The nice thing about Ursula is much more of a feminist. She knows she doesn't care about her own beauty. She doesn't care about all she wants is to rule the planet, which is very rare for an evil witch. Evil witches typically just want to be the most beautiful or live forever. Okay. She doesn't want that. She wants power over everyone, which is very rare for a female witch, bad witch. So Ursula's pretty cool, and her song is awesome.
You got your pretty face.
One of my
Underestimate
of
body language.
One of my favorite anecdotes about the Ursula and the Little Mermaid actually came from comedian Nicole Byer. Have you guys heard her comment regarding? Okay, I brought it up because I wanted to get it right. She says she says that she is a shape-shifting sea witch who chooses to be a fat, beautifully made up, incorrect octopus because she's got 6 tentacles instead of 8. And she only turns into a thin white woman to go where the people are. So there's that. But also she goes on and she says, maybe she took Ariel's voice to show her that having a voice is more important than looking like every other basic witch on the planet. And I love that. I that is something that as a male, I never would have considered because it's not within my periphery just because of my conditioning from society. But I absolutely adore that idea.
Yeah. And she is, she has the knowledge and the power to become part of that
World.
to become part of that world. She actually does. She knows how to do it. She knows how to use all of that, but she chooses not to. What she wants to do is rule the world. And usually in Hollywood films, traditionally, male evil witches want to rule the world. They want to rule over people. If you look at films, Simon King of the Witches, or any of these, they usually want to have power over. And I discuss this in my book, Power Over and Power Through. And so female witches, evil witches, usually want power through. They want to take the power through work and for their own. They want to be beautiful. They want to live forever. They want the love they never want power over. That's for male witches. Ursula changes that game completely because she wants power over. And she doesn't care, even though she knows the power of beauty and the power of her sexuality. She doesn't care about that. What she wants is to rule the world. So she's totally different, and she's really fantastic. So she's Yeah, well, I'm a big fan, so I'm just gonna let that go.
Are you familiar with the Little Mermaid musical?
I have not seen it yet. You mean the Disney
They-
version?
Yeah, the Disney one.
Yeah,
So
I
this
have
is
not. No, I've not seen it.
very mild spoiler, but in that version, they make Ursula and King Triton brother and sister. And
Wow.
so she's Aunt Ursula on top of being the sea witch, and they create this plot device where the Triton's crown and the trident and the shell create this magical trifecta that gives one power over the oceans. So for you to mention her desire to rule the world, it's completely backed up by what they do in the musical, because they make her just this magnificent, power hungry, and her costuming is incredible. She's got this tentacle gown that she pulls on and it pops up behind her and it flares out in an 8-foot peacock fan of tentacles. It's amazing.
Wow.
Is this
They
a Broadway show? Is this a Broadway show? Is this
Yes. Yeah. And there's clips of it on YouTube. I highly recommend looking it up.
Okay.
They just dropped the live action trailer today, the first one for the new Little Mermaid adaptation. It'll be interesting to see if things from the musical on Broadway are brought into the film, because they're going to have to flesh the film out a little bit. It can't just be the 90-minute cartoon runtime. It's going to have a little bit of extra. That'll be fun to see.
I'm also curious if there's anything from the original fairy tale that they might weave into it, because there was shades of that in the 2015 Cinderella, where they went back to Charles Perrault's retelling and kind of brought a bit more of the French version into it. So it would be very interesting if they were to do that, because it definitely would have rounded out a bit more. And now that they're working on the live action Snow White too, which I've seen pictures from the set, and it's a very, God only knows what that's going to be.
I hope they pay homage again to the original story, because as we know in Snow White, when she's this 7-year-old girl and she gets slapped around because she's being, no, that's Sleeping Beauty, isn't it? Which one? Where she gets slapped around and the apple gets, yeah, I think it's Snow White. In one of the original versions, she has an apple get stuck in her mouth, and then this prince has carried her around from room to room, and one of the servants just got tired of her, and that also her coffin has grown, by the way. She's grown, the coffin has grown, she stayed beautiful. She's not really dead, but they think she's dead, but she's growing. And so the servant gets so tired that he slaps this dead woman, and the apple falls out of her mouth, and then she wakes up. It's not a kiss. I hope they do that. I would love to see that. That would be fun.
It was never a kiss. There is not a single, other than film versions, there isn't a single telling of Snow White where it is a kiss. The apple always gets, like the piece that she bit into always gets dislodged from her throat in some way. In the Grimm's version, the prince sees her in the coffin and declares that she's the most beautiful thing he's ever seen. He can't allow her to be put into the earth. So he says to the dwarves, let me take her back to my kingdom, because he is, stricken with love. And they drop the coffin and it shatters and the apple comes out. There's also, in one of the original retellings of Sleeping Beauty, when she touches the spindle, she gets a splinter in her finger, and that's what keeps her knocked out for the 100 years. Because Disney did away with the 100-year sleep, but in every other retelling, she does sleep for 100 years.
Oh! I have a story. Go on.
No. Well, I just was going to add, and of all of these, Sleeping Beauty is the only one where there's a sequel, an original fairy tale sequel, where the prince's mother tries to eat the children because she's an ogre. And so the sequel to Maleficent touched on that, where they made the prince, spoiler, they made the prince's mother the villain, because in the original fairy tales, in the sequel to Sleeping Beauty, the stepmother is this terrible person who tries to cook the children. And so Sleeping Beauty herself has to be very clever and hoodwink her so that her husband, the prince, sees what his mother is doing and banishes her from the kingdom, and all that jazz. But it is kind of interesting, this idea that whatever the talisman of evil is, it must remain part of the person in order for the curse to remain enacted. Okay, now tell your story.
Before you tell your story, I just want to say, you guys, we are loving what you guys are putting in the chat room. We had trouble last week, and our producer was not able to put them up, but we are reading them whether we notice them or not, and we want your input, and this is really great. Some of it we'll jump back to when we can. So I just wanted to comment on that we want this. See, we're getting some of them. Thank you, Robert. But this is why we're here live. So we want those comments. Keep going. Okay, Richard-Lael, it's yours.
So I'm going to tell a horrible joke. It's a bad joke. Do you want to hear it? You really want to hear it? It's bad. It's not dirty. It's just bad. Okay, I'll tell you. Okay, so this was my mother's joke. So in honor of my mother and Valentine's Day, I'm going to tell my mother's joke, okay? So she said, once upon a time, there was this beautiful woman whom a witch had cast a spell on, and she had fallen into a deep slumber, and she was locked away in the tower. And so years went by, and they couldn't awaken this woman. And then one day, word of this beautiful woman has traversed the land, and this man has come from so far, and he sees the castle in the distance, and he manages to find his way up to the tower and sees this beautiful woman, and he kisses her, and he keeps kissing her. He goes back every day for a week. He goes back and he kisses this beautiful woman, and his assistant, Sancho Panza, says, "But why are you kissing that woman?" "Oh," says he, "because she is the most beautiful creature I have ever seen in my life. And also, every time I kiss her, I get a mouthful of rice because she's dead."
Oh my God.
Well, this has been fun. You guys,
Have a good night.
Cover your ears, Black Phillip. Cover your ears.
That was my mother's joke. That was my mother's joke, and it was not a good one.
And so long in the telling. Thank you.
We go down roads that are unexpected on this show. This is definitely one of those roads I did not think I would ever travel, but here we are.
Jason, true annoyance's slap is the greatest thing I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, that was really brilliant. Thank you.
I wanted to make the joke, but I also didn't want to like talk over Richard-Lael. I wanted to hear that story. But yeah, true annoyance's slap is not quite as romantic or as memorable as True Love's Kiss, right?
Yes.
Exactly. And I like True Love's
Absolutely.
Kiss. I think it's okay.
Yes.
Again,
I'm with you,
like I said,
Patti.
when I'm a little kid, and yeah, the prince, you kiss the princess. I'm no more screwed up than everybody else, and I bought into all of it. I have 100 Barbies. I'm no more screwed up than everybody else. I bought into it. Okay.
I bought into it too, Patti. It's hook, line, and sinker. I loved it. I could watch these, and I watched them so many when I was young, and then when I was doing my work in graduate school. You know how many times I've seen these movies over and over and over again. But someone said earlier that Ursula. Just getting back to Ursula for a second. Someone said really Ursula's reason for doing the work is because she's trying to get back at King Triton and for banishing her. And yes, that's the case, but you have to remember what's explained in the Little Mermaid. And she is trying to get back, but what is she trying to gain in getting back? And that is power. She wants to Triton and she wants to take over the kingdom. And that is whether the reason for it is irrelevant, is that a female witch for most part is aiming for something else, that the end game. Whatever it's prompted it is less important. But yes, she is trying to get back at Triton, similar to the way Maleficent is trying to get back at the king too for not inviting her. So it's a similar type of thing. But I also want to point out is that we're talking about these three witches are the three most prominent witches in Disney. Okay, when we say a Disney witch, these are going to be the first three. We haven't talked about the Hag Witch version, who if you put her together with the other one, are two of the most archetypical witches you find in Hollywood retellings. You know, the crone in the woods, the evil crone in the woods, and then the vamp witch. They're two of the most prominent types. But you also have other ones. You have, most people don't know that Disney, the Witch Hazel, the famous Witch Hazel animated character, which is a Looney Tunes character. If you guys recall her, she's fantastic. She is based on a Disney witch from a short, who was also called Witch Hazel. And Charles Schultz thought he was, not Charles Schultz, excuse me. Oh, goodness. Okay. No, just hold on. Doesn't matter. We'll just, Witch Hazel's creator. Okay.
Chuck Jones.
Chuck Jones, thank you. Yeah, to get my animators correct. Thank you. Chuck Jones saw the witch Hazel in Disney's Donald Duck short called, I believe it was Halloween. Halloween special. Anyway, that it was a Halloween special in the 40s. Saw that, loved it so much, loved the voice. June Foray, that he created Witch Hazel based on a Disney witch. Now there were Disney witches prior to even that in the shorts. But then you have Mad Madam Mim, who is Richard-Lael's favorite, we know. And then we
Jason loves Mad Madam Mim. That's his...
Mad Madam Mim from Sword in the Stone, of course. And then more recently, you have a voodoo priestess who's sort of like a witch from hand animated classic animation from Princess and the Frog. You also have the unnamed witch in Brave, who is a fascinating little character. Loved her. And those are more positive witch characters that are more recent. And then one that's not quite a witch would be Mother Gothel, who's considered sort of a witch, but she's not really. She doesn't really do the witchcraft herself. She has a flower that she finds that's magical. So, but she kind of is modeled on, very much so, on a combination, I would say, of the Wicked Queen and the evil stepmother of Cinderella. So she is sort of considered in that realm, but she's not a witch. Those are some of the more recent ones.
In the original fairy tale, she is a witch because the Tangled film has absolutely zero story elements from the actual fairy tale. I despise that movie with a passion because
Courtney.
Don't get me started. But the witch character in that is the same character that we see as the witch in Into the Woods, which the film adaptation famously done by Disney, played by Meryl Streep, who did an amazing job. So it is a bit of a bummer removing her magical powers, because in the original fairy tale, she's far more fascinating as this witch who seems to think that stolen cabbages are a fair exchange for a living child.
Yeah, she's not quite. And you also have, which is not an animated film, you also have the recent Owl, it's called the Owl House. Owl House. Thank you. Not Owl City. I was saying Owl City. Owl. That's a band, isn't it?
Yes.
Owl House is also a more recent one. I believe it's already over. They stopped making it, but it's a cute little cartoon that Disney's done. Another version of the witch, and the more recent versions of these witches are way more. They have much more depth to them and different dimensions than these witches we've been talking about. But in my mind, these three witches are three of the most influential witches in Hollywood's American film history.
I have a question, Heather, about the pursuit of power from the standpoint of a witch. Would you say that that's entirely the focus of the Wicked Witch of the West, is just the sheer she never mentions wanting to take over Oz, but she mentions multiple times that by gaining the ruby slippers, her power will be the greatest in Oz. So do you think that her, within the MGM sphere, because we all know that she's not like that in the books, but within the MGM film, do you think that it is hinting at the possible takeover of an Ozian matriarchy, perhaps? What are your thoughts?
I don't think so. I don't think we really ever know why she's doing what she's doing. I don't think that's even the focus of the film. I think she's just doing it, and she's just bad, which makes her even more a monolithic evil, because there's no reason for it. I mean, there's no reason given. She probably has a reason. She wants the slippers. They were her sisters. She doesn't like Oz. I mean, there's no direct reason. And Wizard of Oz, MGM did exactly what Disney does. They took stories that were way more complex and had way more nuance and boiled it down to a binary good versus evil. And we can get into why and everything, and that's for another time. But that is what the Wizard of Oz did. And the Wizard of Oz they were trying to repeat what Disney did in 1937. That was the reason MGM picked up the Wizard of Oz, was because of Disney's success with Snow White. So the Wizard of Oz, a Wicked Witch, is with us because the Wicked Queen is with us.
Wow. Have you seen the original design of the Wicked Witch, where she was beautiful and she was a vamp and she was based directly off of the Evil Queen?
No, I have not seen that.
So the original design that Gilbert Adrian did for the Wicked Witch of the West was going to be played by Gail Sondergaard, who was known as a great, great beauty of the time. And the original costume was, it had the same cowl that the evil queen had, only instead of a crown, it had the witch's hat, and it had this long cape that was shaped like bat wings. And the entire thing was covered in black sequins. And they did several film tests. You can find photos of it. She looks amazing. And then at some point, one of the producers came in and said, no, evil witches have to be ugly. And so they took Gail Sondergaard and they gave her the ugly treatment. And she took one look at herself in the mirror and she said, I'm not going to do it. And she quit. And then that was when they cast Margaret Hamilton, who had absolutely no problem whatsoever being made up into that green creature who has, I think she still is the #1 film villain of all time, isn't she? Because she keeps winning every year that they do that. Yeah, if you ever get a chance, do look up the original design of the Wicked Witch. She's like pencil thin eyebrows, smirk. Oh my God, she's fabulous.
Wow, that's awesome.
Now, can we just talk a little bit about whether these movies are good? I mean, we're getting to some really heady stuff, but oftentimes we talk about, is this a good movie or not? And we give thumbs up and thumbs down. And I mean, I think I know where Richard-Lael stands, and I think I know where Heather stands. And I think I know where Chad stands. I think Patti and I are maybe
good or not? Should we
I think Patti and I are the only ones who might be 50-50.
Yeah, I think so. And I want to go back. Yes, I want to talk about good or bad as far as movies or plot line or storyline or editing or whatever you want to talk about. But are you guys' opinions, were your opinions the same when you were little kids? I just wonder that, because right now it's weird, and I don't want to get all gendery because gendery is so weird right now. But of the 5 of us, the 2 females are like, yes, the prince kisses, and yes, we like it, and the 3 males don't.
I will admit, as a kid, I had no interest in seeing Sleeping Beauty because it was a princess, right? And I don't really normally relate to princesses. I wanted to watch Spider-Man instead.
Yeah,
though if a cartoon was on, I was going to watch it. As an adult, I think Sleeping Beauty is an amazing film. Unlike Snow White, which I find boring, I do not find Sleeping Beauty boring in any way. I find it exciting, and I really wish I could kick my 8-year-old self in the butt for not really recognizing the greatness of this film, because I should have appreciated it more as a kid. But I think things are often really directed at you, right? Well, this is a princess, so you should watch this. Oh, you're a boy, you're going to want to watch Star Wars, right?
Yeah, that's
and
what I was wondering. That,
yeah.
The little S's, the
I
little
have a little confession to make. So when I was a little boy, I was obsessed with mermaids. I was very much obsessed with merfolk, and I wanted to be a merfolk, a merman pup, merman. But I wanted to be a merfolk, and I was, even at that early age, see where Chadwick was enthralled with the prince from Sleeping Beauty. I really found Prince Eric with his dark hair and his open shirt. I was just a boy, and I was like, oh, his shirt is open. So I did enjoy, and I have to admit too, even though she was the villain, I love the gay representation of Ursula being based on a drag queen.
Well, and according to popular legend, it was originally supposed to be voiced by Divine, but then Divine passed away before production happened. And I haven't been able to find proof of that one way or the other, but I like to think it's true.
I hope it's true. I want it to be true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, Richard-Lael, for me, it was Philip's shoulders.
Well, little me loved all of them, and I grew up watching all of them. And because of my family, because of the people that loved it, we watched Snow White, we watched Cinderella, we watched any of the movies that would come on. And when Disney was doing its thing in the 80s before the Little Mermaid, I kind of was a lull. It was disappointing. I'm like, I'm not watching The Great Mouse Detective more than once. I'm not watching.
I mean, I liked it.
Well,
I
whatever.
did like The Rescuers. I did
The
like
Rescuers
The Rescuers was great. The Rescuers was
Rescuers
a
is
lot of
great.
fun. I love The Rescuers as well.
Yeah.
But
And what was
Great
that one where they lived in the swamp and
that's
they
the
were?
Great Rescuers. That's The Rescuers.
Is that The Rescuers? And
Yeah.
there was a woman who lived in the steamboat on the river.
Yes.
That's
Yeah,
The
Rescuers.
Rescuers.
Okay, I mean, I haven't seen it since I was like 7, but I remember that I loved the villain and I wanted to live on a riverboat that was submerged, like half submerged.
Yeah.
Medusa. She's
R-E-S-C.
Madame Medusa. Yeah.
Rescue Society.
It's also worth mentioning how we consume Disney movies is really different from how a lot of us grew up. When they weren't on TV very often, you had to almost go see them in the theater, and it wasn't until the 90s where you could purchase them on Blu-ray, on DVD or on VHS, and they were available to watch on the Disney Channel or whatever else. For a long time, a Disney movie was this rare treat. It wasn't like Looney Tunes where you could watch after school. Disney was this thing that was sort of locked away in a strange way that was really hard to access. So if you missed it once, you didn't get a second chance for several years. And
that's true. Yeah, and it was like VHSs in the VHSs in the 80s were in that started to help Disney a little bit with that lull, because they were doing so poorly in the 70s and 80s. But I was going to say is when The Little Mermaid came out, I was even not interested. I was like, I'm not going to watch it after The Great Mouse Detective. And I'm like, it's going to be just another one. And then so I wound up not seeing it in the theaters originally, because I was so disappointed and let down by all of the other ones that finally I did see it in the theaters finally, because you got to see these things on the big screen. But then I was like, oh my God, they're back. And then that's all it took. And, I wound up spending the good part of the 90s studying Disney animation, seeing all the ones in the 90s and Beauty and the Beast and all, I don't know about you, Patti, but when I was a little girl, I wanted one of those dresses and all I wanted to do was twirl around in them. Those
Me
princess
too.
dresses with a crown and a twirl. Let's go.
Me too.
Same.
Loved it.
Same here. I wanted to be Cinderella when I was little. 100%.
Oh, and just the whole dress changed and she goes like that. Oh, I was like, that was me.
Yes. And little girls are still doing it. Go to Disneyland, go anywhere, and they get to wear them out. I didn't get to wear mine out for some reason.
Neither did I.
Chat. All right. Well, we aren't talking good movie or bad movie, but time is going away. So we want everybody's vote. And should we vote on all 3 of them together or separate?
So they gotta be separate.
How about we do this? We vote on each movie separately, and then we vote on the witches as a whole.
Okay. All right. So let's start out, and we want everybody out there. We want your wands up or wands down. Let's start out with Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs. Wands up, wands down, wands neutral. Wands up, wands up, wands up, neutral. And what is that, Richard-Lael? Is that half?
Kind of down. It's not really culturally significant. Do I like it? No, I hated every second of it.
Okay. All right. So half mass one. Okay. We've got a lot of wands up coming up. Wands up coming up. Okay. So that is for Snow White. Now let's move to Sleeping Beauty. Wands up, wands down.
I could go.
Unsteady wand.
Sleeping Beauty is amazing. It's perfect in almost every way. It's exciting. It's got true love. It's got true love kissing in it. It's got little fairies. It's got a great villain.
Prince Philip. It has Prince Philip.
Okay, so we are doing good. We are in the lead so far. Now let's chuck up a couple of decades. Little Mermaid. Wands up, wands down.
The Little Mermaid is also very exciting. That scene on the ship when it's going down, that is amazing. I was like yelling and screaming because I don't think I'd ever really watched it before, and I was like, "Oh my God, wife, this is so great!" It's a good movie. It's a great movie.
It is a great movie. Okay, so we've got a lot of wands up. There's hardly been any wands down. There's been one neutral in our audience. So yay, we keep voting everybody. So now we're going to go through all the witches real quick too. Okay, let's go back to Snow White, Evil Witch. Wands up. Everybody loves the Evil Witch. Okay, let's go to the Sleeping Beauty, Evil Witch. Everybody likes the evil witches. All right, let's go to Mermaid.
Ursula.
Okay. Well, you may not like the movie. You may not think it's good or socially, but everybody likes the evil witches. So there we go. You guys, thank you for voting real quick in the last few minutes.
Oh, we got it down.
Who got down? Oh, Robert. Oh, wait, Robert was neutral. Michelle was down. Were you on down on the? We don't know which one, Michelle. Oh, we don't usually ask so many questions on what. So Michelle, we don't know which one that was. If you want to tell us, you can. Oh, we got an NA from Lisa. So you guys watch these movies and vote next week. But we've got now they've changed a little bit, but we are primarily up. We've got a lot of up. So check them out. What you think? We want your opinion on that. In the last couple minutes, everybody. So let's start with Chad, our special guest today. If people go, I love this Chad Hatter guy, where can people find you on websites or social media or anything like that?
You can find me on Instagram as Chad Hatter, all one word, like Mad Hatter, but Chad Hatter. And that's really the only social media that I use because I'm a very old woman. So, and I can't be bothered with the TikToks and all that nonsense. But yeah, you can find me there. And while I have the floor, I want to thank you guys for having me. I hope I didn't interject or dominate airtime too much. It's just I really love the study of fairy tales, so it was nice to be able to kind of try to help a little bit.
No, you were fabulous. We are thrilled to have you. That was perfect. All right, Jason.
First of all, Spartan strong after the other night. Go Green, go white. I'm really attached to Michigan State, which is where I met my wife. So it's been a kind of a rough couple of days here. And Chad, you were great to have on the show. I'm pretty much on every social media, even TikTok. And next week I'll be in Detroit at the Convocation Festival, which I'm very excited about, and a couple of other things coming up too. So yeah, very busy.
Perfect. Richard-Lael.
I am easy to be found.
You are.
I am where any good gentleman psychics are sold. The Gentleman Psychic on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Also, my name, Richard-Lael Lillard, that's who I am. And so I'm easy. I'll be at Satan Con coming up in April, I think. I can't remember right now. But anyway, yes, everywhere. The Gentleman Psychic. I'm easy.
Thank you. Heather.
Well, the best way to find me is on my website, heathergreene.net. All my socials are linked there because they're not all the same like some of these other people across the socials. But I am typically most active on Twitter and Facebook. But I am trying to do better with Instagram because I understand that's where it's at. So I'm trying to do better with that. I am not on, well, I have a TikTok account, but I don't do anything with that. So that's where you can find me. I list my articles there when I have a new article published, because I also am a journalist that covers witchy and occult topics. And I am currently posting a lot of the books that I work on through Llewellyn as an editor. So you can find what's coming out that I've worked on, some really great stuff. But I will be in St. Augustine next week at My Cauldron 2 on Thursday, and I'll post the times as soon as I get confirmation. It's going to be the afternoon next Thursday. And I hope to be seeing the love trees and the haunted tile there while I'm there. So I'll take pictures and tell you all about it. And then I will be at Paginacon in Minnesota and Minneapolis. I think, Jason, you're going to be there too.
Yep,
And that's in March around the equinox. And then we have and then I'll be at Sacred Space in Maryland in April. So I'll have all those dates listed. I hope to see everybody out there at one of these places and say hi.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. I am Patti Negri. PattiNegri.com is a place to get all to my correct social medias as well. Patti Negri Psychic Medium on Facebook, Patti.Negri on Instagram, Patti Negri on Twitter and TikTok. We just try to do them all. I have a bunch of events coming up too. Australia is a private event, but I'm going to be on the Darkwater Cruise through the Caribbean the first week of March, and I've got Parapod Festival. I've got Spirits in the Spring, Paracon in Broadhead, Wisconsin. I've got Copper Queen Haunted Getaway in Bisbee, Arizona, Pacific Coast Caracon. So like us, follow us. It means the world to us. Find the Witches Movie Coven on Facebook. And you guys make this. So tell us what movies you want to see. Tell us what we will add TV shows and all sorts of things. We have beautiful merchandise. Courtney would be wearing it right now, and she probably is if she was on air. So we do wish you well. But go to mysterycontrol.com to get Black Phillip t-shirts and merch and blankets and all sorts of fabulous things. You could even get Black Phillip socks. I mean, who doesn't need? We can get Bro Witch stuff. So this is amazing. So we want you to match us. So thank you. Black Phillip thanks you. I want to thank my co-host Coven. And we really want to thank all of your participation. We want to thank our producers, Rob and Christine at Co-Conspiracy. And at 7 o'clock or 10 o'clock or whatever you are, but there is one more thing for us to do on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. We're in the Witches movie Coven. Remember.